In the vast emptiness of space, humanity thought it was alone. We were wrong. Beyond the stars lurked an ancient terror, older than time itself. This is the story of how everything we knew changed forever. When the darkness came, only a handful of soldiers stood between extinction and survival. Armed with experimental weapons and unbreakable will, they faced horrors beyond comprehension. Watch as ordinary humans become legends in an epic battle across galaxies. But be warned, what you're about to witness will challenge everything you believe about life, death, and what lies beyond. If you think you're ready for this journey into cosmic terror, hit subscribe now and prepare for the fight of our species' existence. The stars burned cold that night when Captain Elias Voss first noticed the anomaly. Stationed aboard the orbital defense platform Aegis 7, he had spent countless hours monitoring deep space scanners, watching for anything unusual in humanity's corner of the galaxy. What appeared initially as static interference quickly evolved into something far more sinister, a pulsating distortion in spacetime itself, growing larger with each passing minute. His weathered face reflected the crimson warning lights as alarms began their shrill symphony, alerting the entire station to the unprecedented event unfolding before them. The distortion didn't behave like any known natural phenomenon. Instead, it pulsed with an almost organic rhythm, as if the fabric of reality itself was breathing. Through the reinforced viewport, Voss watched as distant stars bent and stretched around the anomaly's perimeter, creating grotesque arcs of light that defied every law of physics he'd ever studied. This wasn't just another wormhole or gravitational lensing effect. Something fundamentally wrong was happening to the very structure of space. As technical readouts flooded his console, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing something far older than human civilization. The mathematical patterns emerging from the anomaly matched no known cosmic phenomena, yet strangely resembled ancient symbols found in various human cultures throughout history. These weren't mere coincidences. They formed complex equations that seemed to describe the underlying architecture of reality itself. His hands trembled slightly as he initiated contact protocols, knowing full well that whatever emerged from this rift might not be interested in peaceful communication. The rest of the crew moved with mechanical precision around him, their faces etched with equal parts fear and fascination. Some muttered prayers under their breath, while others frantically recorded every second of this cosmic event, aware they were documenting what could be humanity's first contact with true extraterrestrial intelligence, or something far worse. The initial transmission came not through conventional communication channels, but as a series of psychic impressions that overwhelmed everyone within range of the anomaly. Private Mira Chun collapsed first, clutching her temples as images of endless voids and writhing shadows filled her mind. Her screams echoed through the station corridors, carrying fragments of knowledge meant for minds far older and more prepared than those of 22nd century humans. Dr. Alara Finch, the station's xenobiologist, recognized the pattern immediately. These weren't random neural impulses but carefully constructed data packets, each containing millennia of accumulated knowledge compressed into nanoseconds of mental processing. The beings behind this transmission hadn't simply evolved alongside stars. They had shaped the very laws governing existence, bending reality to their will over eons unimaginable to human consciousness. Their message, though fragmented and incomplete, carried one undeniable truth. Earth existed within territory they claimed as their own, and humanity's presence represented contamination that required purification. Major Hector Ramirez, commander of the station's rapid response team, struggled to maintain order as more personnel succumbed to the psychic assault. He watched helplessly as hardened veterans broke down, their minds overwhelmed by visions of civilizations rising and falling like waves upon some cosmic shore. Through sheer force of will, Ramirez maintained his composure, focusing on the immediate threat rather than the existential implications. "Seal all bulkheads," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Initiate protocol blackout." The station's automated defenses sprang to life, deploying electromagnetic shielding and flooding critical systems with counterfrequency signals. Yet even as they fought back against the mental intrusion, Ramirez couldn't ignore the creeping realization that these beings viewed humanity much as humans might view bacteria infecting a petri dish, something to be eradicated without hesitation or remorse. Their technological superiority wasn't just advanced. It operated on principles so fundamental they rewrote reality itself, making traditional concepts of warfare meaningless. As Ramirez coordinated defensive measures, he understood they weren't facing an enemy they could defeat through conventional means. This would require sacrifices and strategies beyond anything humanity had ever contemplated. Specialist Eric Vale watched the monitors with mounting dread as the station's quantum sensors detected movement within the anomaly. The readings defied explanation, mass readings that fluctuated wildly between subatomic particles and planet-sized objects, energy signatures that oscillated between absolute zero and temperatures capable of vaporizing stars. Each pulse from the rift brought new revelations about their adversaries, beings whose very existence challenged the boundaries between matter and energy, thought and reality. Vale's fingers danced across his console, attempting to compensate for equipment never designed to measure such phenomena. The station's AI, usually an unflappable source of logical analysis, began generating contradictory reports, its algorithms struggling to process information that violated fundamental programming constraints. We're looking at entities that exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions, Vale reported, his voice trembling despite years of military training. Their bodies aren't physical in our understanding. They're more like concentrations of possibility given form. Lieutenant Commander Soren approached the workstation, his cybernetic enhancements glowing faintly in the dim emergency lighting. Translate that into tactical terms, he demanded, though his rigid stance betrayed his own unease. Vale hesitated, knowing how inadequate words would feel against the magnitude of what they faced. Imagine fighting shadows that can step through walls, weapons that rewrite physics on impact, tactics that anticipate your moves before you make them. They're not bound by our three-dimensional battlefield. They can attack from angles we can't perceive, using forces we don't understand. The specialist pointed to a particularly disturbing set of readings. These spikes? That's not weapon discharge. That's them altering local spacetime parameters. One moment, there's vacuum. The next, pure neutronium appears where our fighters should be. It's like they're folding reality itself into weapons against us. Soren's mechanical eye whirred as it attempted to process the impossible data streams. So standard fleet formations are useless, he concluded grimly. Our ships would be torn apart before they could fire a single shot. The first wave of attacks came without warning, materializing directly inside the station's supposedly secure sectors. Private Chun, still recovering from the psychic assault, witnessed their emergence firsthand while performing maintenance in Hydroponics Bay 12. The air rippled like disturbed water, then shattered into crystalline fragments that hung suspended, refracting light into impossible spectra. From these shards stepped creatures that defied categorization. Their forms shifted constantly between recognizable shapes and abstract geometries that made rational observation nearly impossible. Chun raised her plasma cutter instinctively, though she knew the tool would be useless against beings that seemed to exist partly in multiple places at once. The creatures moved with fluid grace, their movements suggesting both predator and prey, hunter and hunted all at once. Their surfaces displayed patterns that pulsed with meaning, though the human brain couldn't quite grasp what they signified. Some crew members screamed, their minds breaking under the strain of perceiving things never meant for human senses, while others froze in fascinated horror. The station's artificial gravity fields distorted around the intruders, creating localized areas where up became down and left merged with right. Emergency klaxons added to the chaos as automated systems struggled to contain breaches that weren't strictly physical in nature. Lieutenant Maya Torres arrived with a security team, armed with experimental phase rifles developed for theoretical encounters with higher dimensional entities. The weapons fired coherent beams of probability manipulation, causing brief flickers in the creatures' forms before they adapted instantly to the new threat. They're learning faster than our systems can adjust, Torres shouted, diving for cover as one creature extended fractal tendrils that passed through solid bulkheads as if they were mist. The battle quickly devolved into a desperate struggle for survival, with human technology proving woefully inadequate against adversaries who could rewrite the rules of engagement at will. As chaos consumed Aegis 7, Captain Voss convened an emergency council in the station's secure command center. Around the holographic table, humanity's brightest minds gathered: physicists who had theorized about extradimensional entities, military strategists who had planned for every conceivable conflict scenario, and philosophers who had pondered the nature of consciousness itself. Yet none of their accumulated knowledge provided adequate preparation for the reality confronting them. Dr. Finch presented her findings. The entities operated on what she termed quantum gestalt consciousness. Individual units functioned as aspects of a greater whole, sharing awareness and experience instantaneously regardless of distance. It's like trying to fight a single organism that exists everywhere at once, she explained, manipulating the holographic display to illustrate how each encounter created new pathways of understanding for the entire collective. Colonel Marcus Hale, veteran of numerous interstellar conflicts, listened intently while studying tactical maps that showed simultaneous incursions across dozens of locations. "Standard military doctrine is useless here," he admitted gruffly. "We're dealing with an enemy that can appear anywhere, use any material as a weapon, and adapt to our strategies before we even implement them." The assembled experts debated potential countermeasures, their voices overlapping in urgency. Some suggested collapsing sections of the station to create barriers the entities couldn't cross, while others proposed using quantum entanglement devices to disrupt their unified consciousness. Voss listened carefully, his mind racing through possibilities as status reports continued to flood in from across the station. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Entire sectors lost containment, life support systems failed unpredictably, and the station's structural integrity field fluctuated dangerously. Yet amidst the crisis, a pattern emerged. Certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation seemed to momentarily confuse the entities, causing them to hesitate before adapting. This sliver of vulnerability gave Voss an idea. Perhaps they couldn't destroy these beings, but maybe they could buy time by exploiting their apparent need to process new stimuli. The decision to deploy Project Eternity came after 36 hours of relentless assault, during which Aegis 7's population had been reduced by 60%. Stored in the station's most secure vault, Project Eternity represented humanity's last, desperate gamble, a weapon system theoretically capable of affecting entities existing across multiple dimensions. Major Ramirez personally oversaw the deployment, his enhanced vision scanning for any signs of dimensional instability as engineers activated the device's containment field. The weapon itself defied conventional description, a sphere of pure potential, maintained in stasis by layers of quantum containment fields that shimmered with iridescent light. Its surface displayed patterns reminiscent of the creature's own shifting forms, suggesting an uncomfortable symmetry between attacker and defense. Lieutenant Commander Soren supervised the calibration sequence, his mechanical components interfacing directly with the weapon's control systems. "We're pushing every safety parameter," he warned, watching as energy readings climbed into previously theoretical ranges. One miscalculation could collapse half the station. Despite the risks, they proceeded with activation, knowing their conventional defenses wouldn't hold much longer. The weapon's activation created effects that bordered on metaphysical. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, and observers reported experiencing flashes of alternate realities where different choices had been made. Specialist Vale monitored the dimensional resonance patterns, his instruments showing unprecedented interaction between the weapon's field and the entity's presence. "They're responding," he reported, his voice tight with tension. "Not physically attacking, but probing, like they're trying to understand what we've created." The entity's behavior shifted noticeably. Their movements became more cautious, their forms less defined, as if they were deliberately avoiding direct interaction with Project Eternity's influence. For the first time since the invasion began, the tide of battle turned slightly in humanity's favor, though at a terrible cost. Entire sections of the station crumbled under the stress of maintaining the weapon's containment field, and those operating near it experienced debilitating side effects as their perceptions of reality fractured under the competing influences. Beyond the immediate crisis at Aegis 7, Earth's government scrambled to respond to this unprecedented threat. Emergency sessions of the United Earth Council revealed deep divisions about how to proceed. Some advocated total mobilization of military resources, while others argued for immediate surrender and attempts at communication. President Elena Vasquez, addressing humanity through global broadcasts, tried to maintain calm while implementing martial law across all major population centers. "We face an enemy unlike any in our history," she declared, her voice steady despite the chaos visible in the background of her office. "But we must remember, we are human. Our ingenuity, our determination, our refusal to accept extinction as inevitable, these are our greatest weapons." Meanwhile, scientific communities worldwide pooled their resources, forming task forces to study everything from ancient mythologies referencing similar entities to cutting-edge research in quantum consciousness. Dr. Rajiv Patel, leading the Theoretical Physics Division, discovered correlations between certain mathematical constants and the entity's behavioral patterns. His team worked around the clock, developing models that suggested the invaders might be vulnerable to specific harmonic resonances in 11-dimensional space. Religious leaders, too, played crucial roles in maintaining social order. Many faiths contained references to beings matching the entity's descriptions, providing unexpected frameworks for understanding the incomprehensible. Sister Maria Esperanza, speaking from Vatican City, reminded billions that humanity had faced existential threats before, emerging stronger through unity and shared purpose. "Fear is natural," she counseled, "but we must not let it divide us. Whether these beings are demons, gods, or something else entirely, our response must come from our highest values." Underground networks spread theories about government cover-ups and secret knowledge, while social media platforms struggled to contain misinformation campaigns that threatened to undermine coordinated response efforts. Yet amid the panic and confusion, acts of extraordinary courage emerged daily. Scientists volunteering for dangerous experiments, civilians organizing neighborhood defense committees, artists creating works that helped people process their trauma. The very diversity of human experience, once considered a weakness in the face of monolithic enemies, now proved to be a strength as different perspectives contributed unique insights into combating the invasion. Within the depths of Aegis 7's engineering section, Dr. Finch led a small team attempting to decode the entity's communication patterns. Using advanced neural interfaces combined with quantum computing clusters, they established what amounted to a primitive dialogue, though the experience left participants permanently altered. Technician Hiroshi Tanaka emerged from each session bearing new tattoos that appeared spontaneously on his skin, intricate patterns that pulsed with meaning beyond human language. "They're teaching us," he whispered during debriefings, tracing the designs with trembling fingers. "Not out of kindness, but necessity. They need us to understand why we must die." The messages conveyed complex philosophical concepts about existence, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. According to the entities, life as humans understood it represented a cancerous growth on the fabric of existence, disrupting delicate balances maintained for billions of years. Their crusade wasn't one of hatred or conquest but cosmic hygiene, the removal of aberrations that threatened universal stability. Yet amidst these chilling revelations, subtle inconsistencies emerged. Certain transmissions contained what appeared to be dissenting viewpoints, alternative interpretations of their mission's necessity. Specialist Vale theorized these might represent individual consciousnesses within the collective gestalt, questioning the orthodoxy of their species' purpose. The communications also revealed glimpses of their society, vast intelligences that existed simultaneously across multiple points in space and time, experiencing existence as a continuous present where past and future coexisted. Their technology wasn't constructed but grown, organically evolving solutions to problems through collective consciousness. Most disturbingly, they demonstrated awareness of humanity's potential, recognizing traits in human consciousness that mirrored their own evolutionary path, albeit on an infinitesimal scale. This acknowledgement sparked fierce debate among the station's leadership. Were they facing implacable exterminators, or beings capable of negotiation and compromise? The question remained unanswered as more pressing concerns demanded attention, keeping the station intact, maintaining Project Eternity's operation, and preventing complete psychological breakdown among the remaining crew. The entity's assault intensified with terrifying precision, targeting not just physical structures but the very foundations of human sanity. Crew members began exhibiting strange behaviors. Some spoke in languages they'd never learned. Others drew complex mathematical formulas during sleep, and a few simply vanished, leaving behind only distorted reflections in metallic surfaces. Dr. Martinez, the station's chief psychologist, documented cases of spontaneous evolution, individuals developing abilities that defied scientific explanation, from limited precognition to temporary control over local gravity fields. These changes came at a cost. Subjects experienced excruciating pain as their neural pathways rewrote themselves, often resulting in permanent damage or death. Lieutenant Torres observed how these transformations correlated with proximity to the entity's presence, suggesting the invaders weren't merely attacking but actively attempting to reshape human consciousness to match their own multidimensional awareness. The station's AI systems began manifesting similarly disturbing characteristics, predicting events with impossible accuracy, generating solutions to problems before they occurred, and occasionally displaying what could only be described as personality traits. Captain Voss himself felt the changes taking root in his mind, moments of clarity where he perceived connections between seemingly unrelated events, followed by crushing migraines as his brain struggled to process information beyond its designed capacity. The entity's methodology became clearer with each passing hour. They sought not just to destroy but to transcend humanity, forcing accelerated evolution that would either result in assimilation into their collective consciousness or complete mental collapse. This revelation forced difficult decisions about quarantine protocols. Infected personnel represented both potential weapons against the invaders and catastrophic security risks. Major Ramirez implemented strict isolation procedures, though he knew they might be condemning valuable assets in their fight for survival. The line between resistance and transformation blurred daily, raising fundamental questions about what it meant to remain human in the face of such overwhelming influence. The final assault began with a phenomenon that defied all previous observations. The very concept of linear time began to unravel within Aegis 7's vicinity. Specialist Vale monitored temporal distortions that manifested as overlapping realities, where past, present, and future versions of the station existed simultaneously. Crew members encountered their alternate selves, some victorious, others defeated, creating paradoxes that threatened to collapse local spacetime completely. Lieutenant Commander Soren, utilizing his enhanced perception capabilities, identified a pattern in these temporal anomalies. They converged toward Project Eternity's location, suggesting the entities were attempting to neutralize humanity's last line of defense through fundamental alteration of causality itself. Captain Voss made the agonizing decision to initiate Omega Protocol, sacrificing 40% of the remaining crew to create a temporal buffer zone around the weapon system. These brave souls voluntarily entered designated sectors, their neural implants broadcasting constant feedback loops that temporarily stabilized local time flow. The sacrifice bought precious minutes as the entities adjusted their strategy, testing different approaches to breach this new defense. Dr. Finch discovered that the invaders' attempts to manipulate time generated unique harmonics, vibrational patterns that resonated differently with Project Eternity's quantum field. By tuning the weapon's frequency to these harmonics, they created brief windows where the entity's multidimensional forms became partially anchored in conventional spacetime. During these moments, conventional weapons proved surprisingly effective, allowing targeted strikes that forced the invaders to withdraw temporarily. However, each successful attack came at a cost. The temporal manipulations caused irreversible changes to survivors' perception of reality, leaving them trapped between moments of past and future. Major Ramirez organized teams to document these experiences, hoping to find patterns that might predict the entity's next moves. The battle evolved into a complex dance of temporal positioning, with both sides maneuvering through increasingly unstable layers of existence. Time dilation effects created surreal combat scenarios where seconds stretched into hours, allowing for strategic planning during what should have been instantaneous exchanges of fire. Yet with each passing cycle, the station's structural integrity degraded further, and the number of stable temporal refuges diminished. Humanity's last stand became not just a fight for survival, but a desperate attempt to maintain coherence in a universe that threatened to unravel completely. As the temporal war reached its climax, humanity's scattered remnants across the solar system launched coordinated operations codenamed Operation Ascension. Fleets of drones equipped with modified versions of Project Eternity's technology deployed from Mars' orbit, establishing a network of quantum resonance points that created interference patterns in spacetime. These nodes generated standing waves that disrupted the entity's ability to traverse dimensions, effectively creating choke points in their multidimensional assault paths. On Earth, underground facilities activated experimental consciousness amplifiers, linking millions of volunteer minds into a collective gestalt that rivaled the invader's own unified awareness. This human hive mind, though crude compared to its opponents, proved surprisingly resilient, adapting to psychic attacks with remarkable speed. The entities responded by intensifying their efforts to overwrite reality itself, transforming entire regions of space into chaotic zones where physical laws ceased to apply consistently. Cities on Luna's surface experienced periods of negative gravity, while orbital habitats found themselves briefly existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Yet each adaptation triggered unforeseen consequences. The more the entities manipulated fundamental forces, the more unstable their own forms became when exposed to humanity's countermeasures. Dr. Patel's team discovered that the invaders' attempts to maintain dimensional cohesion created harmonic vulnerabilities that could be exploited through precisely calibrated resonance frequencies. Space stations converted into massive harmonic generators, broadcasting patterns that forced the entities to expend increasing amounts of energy to maintain their presence in conventional space. The battle transformed into a complex symphony of vibrating energies, with both sides composing and countering melodies that affected the very fabric of existence. Ground forces developed new tactics based on these discoveries, using portable resonance devices to create temporary safe zones where conventional weapons regained effectiveness. The war entered a phase of dynamic equilibrium, neither side able to achieve decisive victory, but both locked in a deadly embrace that threatened to consume reality itself. In the heart of this multidimensional conflict, humanity's greatest weapon emerged not from technology but from the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Dr. Finch, working with the emergent human gestalt mind, identified a crucial difference between human and entity consciousness. Whereas the invaders operated as a perfectly synchronized collective, human minds retained individual autonomy while contributing to the whole. This cognitive diversity created unpredictable variations in their mental outputs, generating quantum fluctuations that disrupted the entity's attempts at perfect harmony. The discovery led to Operation Resonance Cascade, where volunteers worldwide linked their minds through neural interfaces, intentionally introducing controlled chaos into their unified consciousness. These deliberate imperfections created ripples in the quantum field that the entities struggled to compensate for, their perfection-oriented mentality unable to process calculated disorder. Major Ramirez coordinated ground teams that combined these mental operations with physical combat, developing hybrid tactics that leveraged both realms of warfare. Soldiers learned to synchronize their thoughts while maintaining tactical independence, creating mobile strike forces that appeared to the entities as both unified threats and individual targets simultaneously. The invaders' responses grew increasingly erratic as they attempted to parse these contradictory stimuli, their forms flickering between dimensions as their consciousness struggled to maintain cohesion. Lieutenant Torres pioneered new training protocols that emphasized this dual approach. Soldiers practiced entering meditative states while engaging in high-intensity combat, learning to manipulate their own quantum signatures while firing conventional weapons. These techniques allowed them to create localized zones of dimensional instability, trapping entities in transitional states where they became vulnerable to attack. The battle evolved into a complex dance of consciousness and matter, where success depended as much on mental discipline as physical prowess. As more volunteers joined the Gestalt network, its power grew exponentially, reaching a critical threshold where human consciousness began generating its own dimensional constructs, temporary spaces where the laws of physics aligned with human expectations rather than entity preferences. These sanctuaries became crucial staging areas for counterattacks, protected by the collective will of millions of minds working in imperfect harmony. The turning point came when Captain Voss, linking his consciousness to the Gestalt network, experienced a fundamental shift in perception. Through the combined awareness of billions, he grasped the entity's true nature, not as malevolent conquerors but as ancient guardians corrupted by their own perfection. Their crusade against imperfection stemmed from a flaw in their collective consciousness, a recursive loop that amplified minor deviations into existential threats. Understanding this, Voss initiated Operation Paradox Point, directing the Gestalt mind to broadcast carefully constructed cognitive patterns that introduced manageable imperfections into the entity's unified consciousness. These patterns, derived from humanity's rich tapestry of cultural contradictions and philosophical dilemmas, created controlled chaos within the invader's Gestalt. The entities reacted with what could only be described as confusion. Their perfect synchronization faltered as they attempted to process concepts like individual choice, artistic expression, and moral ambiguity. Dr. Patel's team monitored how these introduced imperfections propagated through the entity's consciousness, creating cascading effects that weakened their dimensional anchors. Ground forces adapted their tactics accordingly, targeting areas where the invaders' forms destabilized, forcing them to expend energy maintaining their presence in conventional space. The battle transformed into a complex exercise in applied philosophy, with human consciousness weaponizing its own flaws against an enemy defined by its pursuit of perfection. Lieutenant Commander Soren developed algorithms that translated human creativity into quantum resonance patterns, creating weapons that fired bursts of conceptual contradiction. These munitions proved devastatingly effective, causing the entities to fragment into isolated consciousnesses that struggled to reintegrate with their collective. As more imperfections took root in their unified mind, the entities began exhibiting behaviors resembling individual thought, questioning their mission, considering alternative solutions, and even showing hints of empathy for the flawed beings they had come to eradicate. The war entered its final phase as humanity's collective consciousness guided the entities through a controlled descent from perfect unity to functional diversity, mirroring the evolutionary path that had shaped human consciousness over millennia. The aftermath of humanity's victory left indelible marks on both victors and vanquished. The entities, now restructured into a more flexible collective consciousness, negotiated peace terms that acknowledged Earth's sovereignty while establishing protocols for coexistence in shared dimensional spaces. Humanity emerged forever changed of the Gestalt network, though partially dissolved, left lasting connections between minds that allowed for unprecedented levels of cooperation and understanding. Cities rebuilt themselves according to new architectural principles that incorporated dimensional awareness, creating urban environments that could shift between conventional and higher dimensional states as needed. Scientific advancement accelerated exponentially as researchers accessed residual knowledge from their contact with the entities, leading to breakthroughs in quantum mechanics, consciousness studies, and dimensional engineering. Yet the price of survival remained evident in every survivor: eyes that sometimes saw beyond normal sight, minds that occasionally drifted into adjacent probabilities, and bodies that bore the subtle marks of forced evolution. Captain Voss, now serving as humanity's ambassador to the reformed entity collective, watched as young children played in parks where gravity occasionally reversed, their laughter carrying notes of dimensions beyond human hearing. The entities, too, had transformed, their forms now expressed individuality within unity, their perfect symmetry replaced by beautiful imperfections that reflected the diversity of existence. Together, both species forged a new chapter in cosmic history, their relationship built on mutual respect for each other's flaws and strengths. As stars continued their ancient dance across the heavens, Earth stood as testament to the power of imperfection in a universe that had once valued only perfection. Remember, the story of humanity's greatest triumph continues to unfold. Subscribe now to witness how our species shapes the future of existence itself.